Thank you so much for joining us today. You know, yesterday we were in San Diego, California, talking with one of the country's most notorious drug dealers, Mr. Ricky Ross, better known as Freeway Rick. Take a look at this tape.
I think I'm an expert on cocaine. There's not many people that has dealt with as much cocaine as I have. I think I'm an expert. I saw people strung out from snorting cocaine, where they snort cocaine all day long. I saw them take powder and put it in cigarettes and smoke it, just like a rock smoker will. And they'll smoke back to back to back.
Well, Ricky Ross is right now facing a life sentence, but he says he deserves to be a free man. Why? Because he says the CIA used him as a pawn to sell drugs to help fund a secret war in Nicaragua. Take a look at this tape.
If it was good for them to sell drugs, then it should have been good for me to sell drugs. The money from the drugs went to buy guns for the Contras.
Now, Ricky Ross compared himself to Superfly, the character from the 1970s movie, who seemed to have it all.
Cocaine was like a situation like party, you know, like have fun, you know, like it's like just being cool, you know. It wasn't nothing negative about it, you know. It wasn't ever, we didn't ever see a crack mother. It wasn't no crack mothers. It wasn't nobody strung out on cocaine. It was like the people that was buying, you know, made $500, $600 a week, drove brand new cars, had nice looking women, wore nice clothes, you know what I'm saying?
But Ricky Ross lost it all when he was arrested on cocaine trafficking charges last year. And Ricky Ross is right now at the center of one of the country's biggest controversies when it comes to drug. And I'm going to tell you something, if this controversy continues to escalate the way it has, and it will, I think this country is going to stop for a second and say it's wake-up call time. I think right now what we need to do is try to figure out whether or not there's any truth to this. So today we're going to discuss it. And my first guest worked for the government of the United States, for the Drug Enforcement Agency, for 25 years. He recently wrote a book called Triangle of Death, which he wrote and says it was written as fiction because if you had written it as fact, well, please welcome Mr. Michael Levine to the show. You know, if you had written this book as a fact and told some of the true stories that you could tell, what would happen?
I just couldn't. Let me explain why.
Certainly.
I was a deep cover agent. Deep cover agents are a small group of people who pose as criminals and go into other countries. For instance, the Arab terrorist role in the book is one I actually played. And we are sent into these countries to live on our acting ability. There's no 911 to call. The mission is to reach the top of the drug world. And I was a deep cover agent. I lived with Chinese drug dealers in Bangkok, Thailand during the Vietnam War. I lived with ex-Nazis and Argentine mass murderers in Argentina.
Well, at that time you weren't a DEA agent.
No, I was in the hard narcotics smuggling unit of customs. And the case that I was living with these Chinese drug dealers led me right to Chiang Mai. It was the first case that was killed by Central Intelligence. Ironically, it was a case that involved the smuggling of heroin into the U.S. in the dead bodies of GIs. Now, this was my first instance where I was brought into the embassy in the middle of the night. I was being forced by my government, mysteriously, suddenly to lie to the drug dealers. All logistic support was withdrawn. And the drug dealers had bought my act. I get over pretty good. I grew up in the South Bronx. My brother was a heroin addict. As a matter of fact, I grew up, I'm a Jew who grew up in a Puerto Rican black neighborhood. And as a kid, I used to lie and say I'm half Puerto Rican. So I was kind of undercover, like right away, right from the get-go. It was good training.
You trained yourself well from a young age.
And I was a bad kid. I was arrested twice before I was 16. Had I been arrested 1 week later, I could never have been a federal agent. They were considered juvenile offenses. I wanted to live out a James Bond fantasy. I got into a fight with a guy. I was a heavyweight boxer, a martial artist when I was in the military. And in a heartbeat, I learned how short life is. The guy pulled a gun, stuck it in my stomach. A fellow military policeman pulled the trigger and it misfired. From that time on, I wanted to live out every fantasy I could, and I aimed myself to be a deep cover agent. Well, there's a poor kid from the Bronx. How do you get to live that kind of life? And I did. I lived out every fantasy you could imagine.
And over 25 years, you did this all over the world.
All over the world. Every country we name in the book, I was there.
And name the countries that you name in the book.
Well, from Bangkok, Thailand, Buenos Aires, Argentina. I lived there for 3 years. Mexico, Colombia, Panama, Bolivia, Germany, France, you name it. I've been there posing as a criminal. And in every case, including probably the biggest case in our history, I reached the top of the drug world. And to go back to the original question, and let me get to what happened when I reached the top of the drug world. The original question is, why can't I tell this as nonfiction? Well, when you become a deep cover agent, you're in violation of these countries' laws. If you screw up, you die. There's no doubt about it, and agents have died. In fact, the death I write about, the tortured death, one that's linked to CIA, comes from real life. You die. So the one rule that you live by is, and they tell this to you, resolve every situation in your own favor. And it is better to be tried by 12 than carried by 6. Now, when you live that rule, even though I was watching my brother die, a heroin addict, die inch by inch, and even though I believed I was doing right, I knew I was doing a lot of wrong things to survive. Anybody who does that has to survive, has to do everything they can. Now, the point is, when you live by that rule, you can't come out and talk about it. So you unwittingly join the U.S. government mafia, of which part the CIA is the kingpin, the Don.
So you're saying that the CIA is the kingpin of the head of the United States Mafia?
Look, I've put thousands of people in jail, thousands. DEA gave a British writer once a figure of 3,000. It was a lot more than that. I've never failed in putting a case before court, conspiracy cases, undercover cases. I've never lost a case. You know, in every one of these cases, what I'm talking about is I have a lot of credibility. I live by my credibility. So when I say I have personal testimony about Central Intelligence killing, murdering cases, one case, the biggest drug case I think in our history, Operation Trifecta, was a case where, posing as a mafia don, Luis Miguel Garcia, we went to Bolivia. We plugged into a pipeline of massive amounts of cocaine going from Bolivia through Mexico with the protection of the Mexican army into California. Both the CIA and the State Department and the Justice Department ganged up to kill that case.
To stop the case?
To murder that case. Absolutely.
Why?
Murder that case. Well, there's several reasons. First, all I can do is testify as I would in federal court as to what happened. I'm in Panama. We ordered 15 tons of cocaine to go through Mexico, be paid for in Panama, into the U.S. from Bolivia.
Stop there for a second, Michael. You're in Panama. You are a deep cover agent for the United States.
Suddenly, all logistics support is taken away.
But wait a second. But they told you, as a deep cover agent, to buy cocaine and send it through this country and bring it into the United States of America.
If to catch the cocaine was never intended to reach the U.S. It was going to be sold to undercover agents. The important thing to know is that we plugged into a pipeline that existed for years.
Okay.
And that pipeline, massive amounts of cocaine were flowing from Bolivia, also Colombia. We learned that during this investigation. Massive amounts were going onto the streets of the U.S. At that time, I already knew my daughter was a cocaine addict. I had already lost, my brother at that time had already committed suicide. He wrote a note to my family and friends, I just can't stand the drugs anymore, 19 years of addiction. So there I am at the biggest case in our history, at the top of the drug world. I'm in Panama, in a country that was being run by a CIA employee, basically, Manuel Noriega, and my government suddenly withdraws logistics support, and I and then the other Chicano-Mexican undercover agent, we were forced to lie. We were forced to lie to these people who could kill us in a heartbeat, because our government had withdrawn logistics support. In a screaming argument I had midnight, and I describe it in a nonfiction book, my DEA supervisor tells me, as an explanation, the CIA is in this in 4 countries. We're not telling you everything.
Okay, no, wait, I got to hold you there for a second. Yeah. I have to take a break. But the reason why Michael is here today is because we are going to talk about this entire thing that's rumbling all over America. Was the CIA responsible for, in any way, shape, or form, funneling cocaine into the United States of America, helping to turn it into crack, and turning it into what is now devastated the majority of the inner cities of America? A lot of people say that this is just another bull case drawn up by black people who are just so paranoid to say that everything is a conspiracy. But today you're going to meet several people who are former employees of our United States government, people who have looked at this over years, who will say, whether it was a conspiracy or not, they don't want to talk about it. But did the CIA know that drugs were coming into the United States of America and help it get here? The answer to the question is yes.
Absolutely.
Does the CIA do this on a regular basis? The answer to the question is
absolutely. I wish I could take them to court.
and right now, just by virtue of the fact that Montel Williams is doing the show, someone is going to say, you see, it's another black journalist who is feeding into the conspiracy story. And most of you who know me know I'm probably one of the most conservative people in this country. I spent 20 years in the United States government working for the military. This show is about finding some truth and saying to the American people, let us get the answers that we demand, because it's our dollars that paid to bring coke to America. We'll be back right after this. We're talking today, this is really a show about what we can call rumors. The rumor that the CIA was involved in making sure that cocaine made it to the streets of South Central LA back in the early 80s, and then helped to develop and turn it into crack, which was then spread across America, and is the reason why most of our inner cities are in the plight that they are in. And a lot of this has been out there for years, but it wasn't until recently that the story broke again. And my next guest is a reporter, not from San Diego, California, but from San Jose Mercury News, and he wrote a story called The Dark Alliance. Please welcome Mr. Gary Webb to the show. And Gary, this really, I think the current fervor over this issue is because of your article. A lot of people may not be familiar with what the Dark Alliance meant and stands for. Why don't you tell America what the story is about first, and then we'll talk about the issues.
It was about a cocaine ring that operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And they were funneling, they were selling cocaine in South Central. They were also selling it in Oakland. They were selling it in San Francisco. They were selling it in San Jose. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember news, the Contras from Nicaragua. So go right ahead.
The men that were running the cocaine ring were top officials of this Contra army. And what we found was that they were selling this stuff in South Central, which is, predominantly black section of Los Angeles, immediately before the outbreak of the crack cocaine epidemic. They started selling powder. Tons and tons and tons of powder cocaine was going into this one small area of the city. And from there, they sold it to Freeway Rick. And Freeway Rick took the powder, turned it into crack, and starting in 1983, 1984, began distributing it to predominantly the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles. And they spread it, from there.
From there. Now, since this has happened, you have butted heads with everybody in Washington, D.C., trying to get information about the story. Have you not?
Yeah, we worked on this for a year, and it was only because, some people at National Archives believe freedom of information means freedom of information. We got some documents that showed that pretty strongly there were some CIA connections to this.
Let's talk a little bit about those documents for a second, because there's a gentleman, this figure that we talked about yesterday on the show. His name is Blandón. Danilo Blandón, who was a person who was a member of the aristocracy of Nicaragua before the fall of Somoza, and then he fled and comes to the United States and decides, while he's in the United States, so you can all understand this, he wants to raise money for the revolutionaries who are trying to overthrow the government that just overthrew them. So here in the United States, they try to do fundraisers, and that doesn't work, and then Blandón gets a scheme, well, I can get some cocaine cheaply, with some help from some of my friends, and get it into the United States of America. All I need to find is somebody who can sell it. So they find a gentleman by the name of Rick Ross, who is Freeway Rick. Rick Ross comes in and starts selling cocaine at the terms beginning 1 or 2 grams. And within weeks, 2, 3, 4 kilos a week. Within months, what was it, 10 to 15 kilos a day. Ricky Ross was selling cocaine to the point of making $3 to $4 million a day. He sold so much cocaine, it hurt his fingers to count the money. Not only in Los Angeles, but in Cincinnati, in St. Louis, all the way across America. So some can say, and this is the reason why people are so angry at you in your article, is that Ricky Ross, the dope dealer, was supplied by the CIA because Blandón was an operative for the CIA, correct?
Blandón and Meneses were working for an army that was a wholly owned subsidiary of the CIA. They were meeting with CIA agents. Blandon, and this came out in court. I mean, Danilo Blandon is now a government witness. He works for the Drug Enforcement Administration, and we've paid him, I don't know, $166,000 over the last 18 months because he's such a good informant. So they put him on the witness stand in Ricky Ross's case, and he testified that in 1981, he went to Honduras, he met with the commander, the military commander of the CIA's army, and he was instructed to go raise money in California for this Contra army. And he was told that the ends justified the means.
And those ends being sell cocaine if you have to.
Well, look, he was in the room with the Nicaraguan representative of the Cali cartel, Mr. Meneses, and he was in the room with a government marketing expert named Danilo Blandon. Now, if they weren't talking about selling cocaine, I don't know what they were talking about.
And this is all information they can find on a website. I have to use that website, but on a website on the internet. So we're going to put that up so people can go and
look at these documents
take a look at the documents yourself and judge it. But Michael, now, I mean, there's a stretch here. Here's a guy who is obviously a CIA operative, Mr. Blandon, who is working with this government-backed army that we've kind of created in Nicaragua. But how the heck does this guy get to bring in tons of cocaine? When I say ton, I'm talking tons. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 tons of cocaine weekly in the United States of America for 7 years, and no one can ever catch him.
Well, number one, Mr. Meneses was actually indicted in 1984. He was known within, my own sources in DEA told me he was known as el rey de la droga, the king of drugs. He was in more than 40 files and indicted mysteriously, and people within DEA say that it was CIA intervention that kept this sealed indictment from ever being opened. So he was well known. He's well known. The connection between him, Blandon, and Calero, who was the head of the Nicaraguan government in exile, is clear. There's a clear evidentiary.
We got a picture of him.
Yeah, there's a clear evidentiary trail. Now, if you want to follow that trail up, you have to first understand how CIA and DEA work. I was a country attaché assigned to Argentina. Now, during those years, there were people who I inherited on the payroll who were murderers. They were also on the CIA payroll. So,
Murderers on the CIA payroll.
Not only murderers, I'm talking about mass murderers. And I wrote about it in books that I thought would have America marching on Washington. Nothing ever happened.
How are you alive today?
A miracle. Just absolutely.
Why didn't the CIA bump you off before you came to the Montel Williams show? Because to me, they will say tomorrow, he's a kook, he's crazy, don't believe anything he has to say, don't worry about it, there's no conspiracy.
Well, at the same time, DEA called me one of their best in a New York Times article. The only thing I can say, Montel, I lost my son, I lost my brother because of this phony CIA-backed drug flow. Somebody once said that if you don't have anything in your life to die for, you don't have anything to live for. And after losing my son, that's the story of my life. God bless Gary Webb. I've been trying to tell this, and other DEA agents are now coming out trying to tell this story.
Let me take a break. When we come back, we got a lot of people who disagree with all of this. They're here today. We're going to have a good argument. We'll be back right after this. My next guest is the Director of Media Analysis for Accuracy in Media, AIM, and says that what Mr. Webb wrote is incorrect. Please welcome Mr. Joe Goulden to the show. And also welcome the host of his own radio talk show on WWRC in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Mr. Joe Madison to the show. I say that Mr. Madison has dedicated the last 3 weeks of your broadcast?
Oh, no, it's been 7 weeks, 3 hours a day, 5 days a week.
To this issue?
To this issue. They will not allow me to talk about anything else. And when I say they, I mean the people in this 50,000-watt station from Philadelphia to the hills of West Virginia, black, white, Hispanic, every color you can imagine, every nationality, every economic, social group. People want to know. America wants to know.
And Mr. Goulden, you say that this is really out to lunch, right?
Montel, this is journalistic malpractice of the grossest sort, and we need an investigation of this, not where the CIA was in the drug business. That's been investigated ad infinitum, but why a supposedly respectable newspaper group, such as the Night Rooter newspapers, would publish ill-sourced, contradictory stories that rely more upon innuendo and misinformation than fact.
Okay, well now when we talk about misinformation and innuendo, here's something Mike has right there. Mike, you have a document that I saw on a recent show,
Yeah.
but this document is a transcript of Oliver North's diary, correct?
I can go on for the next 2 hours.
Oh, wait, this has
Incidents where the CIA, and I put thousands of people away in jail, Mr. Goulden.
Mike,
for
we're not arguing that.
For a lot less.
Mike,
a lot
listen
less.
to me.
A lot less than you see here. This is Oliver North's
Mike,
diary.
that's great. That came out in the 1980s when they had 3 congressional committees, a special counsel, Lawrence
The only
Wall,
trouble with
worked
that
their
was
butts
this
off on
was
this.
not given to Kerry. This was held back from Kerry.
And
Jerry-
Walsh never investigated this.
and
Nobody has
Wilson
ever
never
denied that
investigated.
people on the fringe of the country movement were involved in drug
Just
deals.
so-
Nobody's
wait a
ever
minute,
denied
just
that.
so we know-
What this man has claimed is this was a CIA plot.
Hold on a second.
So now he's backed away from his claim.
Well, this
He
is-
tells the
hold
Washington
it,
Post
hold it.
incredibly, I didn't say CIA was doing this.
You know, one of the
You know,
things
a man
that-
doesn't have the
People have
cowardice of
to,
his own
people have
convictions.
to understand about a
Whoa,
CIA.
guys.
Wait a second, gentlemen.
People have to understand about a CIA whose chief of counterintelligence for 8 years sold America's top secrets as if it was a Bayonne, New Jersey garage sale, and nobody stopped him. The FBI had to fight CIA to arrest him, not CIA. So when you talk about, this is an agency that was experimenting with mind control drugs, putting LSD in the food of patients.
Don't forget the Abraham
unsuspecting
Lincoln
patients.
assassination.
This is all, well, I mean, I'm talking about
Montel,
specific.
if
Now
I
let's
could-
talk.
if I could say
Let's
something.
talk about reality.
Hold on a
Right
second.
here.
Wait, Mike, hold on a second.
If I could just say something, one of the things I've always noticed, and I hope I can do it without interruption, is that as soon as facts are being made, you'll notice as soon as he pulled out that document, interruption. Now let me tell you what we're asking for is a Congressional Records Act. In other words, let's take all of the records, classified and otherwise, put them out before the people, and let's see who knew what and when they knew it. Here is the accusation. The accusation isn't that agents were on the street corner selling drugs. The accusation is that drugs are being sold by the Contras and that the CIA knew about it and didn't do anything. That's the accusation. So what we need is a Records Act so that
Joe-
you and I and all of us. Now,
Well,
if he
let's-
says he knows what the CIA knows, he's saying more than the CIA is saying.
Joel, I know this for a fact. They put Eden Pastora out of business in the Southern Front. Commandante Zero, for instance. Alan Fears, who ran the Central American Task Force, testified to the Kerry Committee. Yes, there were people involved in the Contra movement who were doing drugs. But
That's
have
what
this-
we said.
Well,
That's
yeah,
exactly
but
what we're saying.
your time long.
The question is, does the CIA know?
We have Ricky Ross here, starting the drug business in 1979 when Blandon was still in Managua. I talked to Adolfo Calera from Managua at length last week.
Another
he says, I've never
CIA
seen
operative.
these guys.
Yeah,
So what? He
investigation.
ran the
So
thing.
what?
Okay, well,
Yeah, we
let's
got a
hold it.
picture of
Hold
him
on a
meeting with the
second.
drug dealer.
Let's stop for just a second. All the people of this country are asking for is let's investigate this. And the
Investigate
reason
it,
why
that's all.
is because for things like what Mike's been trying to show. Mike, if I can do it real quick, this is just an excerpt from Ollie North's diary where he says particularly about talking to this same person that Mike just said, that Mr. Golden said he talked to last week, Mr. Calero, the same person you talked to last week. It says in Ollie North's diary, contact him so we can get 1,500 kilos?
Well, what it says, we have to investigate.
Okay.
It's never been investigated. Quickly, this is just one piece of several hundred pages of Ollie North's diary reflecting drugs. It is a phone call from Dewey Claridge. Who is Dewey Claridge? He's a top CIA official who was convicted of lying to Congress and pardoned by President Bush. During this conversation, they speak of a phone call to Calero. Calero, there's a direct
Mr. Golden
evidentiary
talked to last
chain.
week.
There's a direct evidentiary chain from Calero right to Ricky Ross. It's there to be investigated.
That's all.
In this, and mind you, there were 2 attempts at classifying this. In this, they reflect one aircraft to pick up 1,500 kilos. Now, I promise every one of you, if I, as a DEA agent, got this in your diary, you would have 100 DEA agents around you, around the clock. And this is one page of several hundred. They've
Mike,
never been
kilos of
investigated.
what?
Let me
Kilos
take-
of what?
Well, you tell me what.
Let me take a break.
Coffee!
Yeah.
Coffee!
Let me take a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Congressman Charles Rangel, who says that, you know what, all we want to know is the facts. Let's look at the facts and give us all an opportunity as citizens of this country to evaluate the facts.
Any
That's all
American.
everybody wants to do. Every American wants to know the truth. When we come back, we'll hear from an American who wants to know it. We'll be back right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Congressman Charles Rangel to the show. And before Before we take even one more step, I'd like to be able to set this up for our viewers at home so they understand what we're talking about. What we're talking about here is that there is at least information that alludes to the fact that over an 8-year period of time, from 1982 until about 1988, there is a person who is a known paid informant for the CIA who is funneling drugs to a crack dealer, dope dealer in Los Angeles. This is the part that's a known fact for most of the information. This person was known to be a CIA operative. He is the person providing cocaine. Tons of cocaine that's coming into the United States under protection. No one ever busts him. His partner is the biggest drug dealer in Central America, a guy by the name of Meneses, who obviously is supplying to him. Everybody completely looks the wrong way. For 8 years, this gentleman, Ricky Ross, is able to sell his drugs with the assistance of this guy, Blandone, selling drugs all over the place, never gets busted. He goes to jail, is in jail, a month away from getting out of jail. The CIA or the DEA sets up an elaborate sting to bust him as soon as he walks out of jail. He's in jail, not selling any drugs. They set up a sting, bust him. Ricky Ross is now back in jail waiting sentencing for another bust that took place after he got out of jail the first time. So the question is, was the CIA, did they just turn their backs and allow drugs to come into America? If they did that, are they then not responsible for the epidemic of crack in America? That's the next conclusion that some people say. Well, other people may say no. The ends justified the means. If this was the only way we could pay for an army to fight overseas, that's the way we do it. But do we do that at the cost of American citizens? Congressman Rangel, what do you think?
I think that Congresswoman Maxine Waters and commentator Joe Madison, and of course my old buddy Mike and Webb here, will be able to say as a legacy that they're leaving to their children that at long last someone pulled the reins in on the CIA. We are not just talking about whether or not they devastated communities throughout these United States. We're just saying that the CIA has been and is now completely out of control. And I don't understand, Montel, as to why all of America isn't completely outraged. You cannot target a black community with cocaine, with crack cocaine, any more than you could with poison gas without it destroying America. And as far as I'm concerned, the CIA is being charged with mass murder. And it's time for this allegation to be exposed, and it should not take 60 days to do it.
Mr. Golden, what do you say to this?
I think Charlie's jumping to conclusions here. We had 3 congressional committees look at this in depth in the 1980s, a special counsel. They found there was some stuff on the fringes of it. This is a germ of truth in Webb's fantasy articles here.
Can I ask you a question, Mr. Golden? Did we not just have 2 congressional committees look into the Persian Gulf syndrome and come back and say we had nothing to do with the fact that our soldiers and sailors are sick? Now, last week, they just came back and said, oh, by the way, we did give them a pill, and oh, by the way, when we did bomb that thing, they probably got some nerve gas, and oh, by the way, we may be responsible for the injuries of thousands of Americans.
What Charlie Rangel is doing and Joe Madison here are taking allegations, very flimsy allegations. If anybody sits down and look at the analysis we've done, and the Washington Post himself, which is not a CIA defender, tore this thing apart on evidentiary grounds. Blandon, Ricky.
Wait.
Ricky was already in the dope business before he got hurt. While Blandon was still in Monogamy.
How do you explain Blandon's testimony under oath as a government witness that he was selling cocaine for the Contras and that the CIA was in charge of it? How do you explain that?
That's not in his testimony. That's
it is.
unfortunate.
It's in the grand jury transcript.
I shared one of the...
It's posted on the internet so anybody in the world can read it.
I wish they would. This is what got me was what the police said.
Hold on, just a second, gentlemen.
I chaired one of these investigative committees when I was chairman of the Select Narcotic Committee on Crime. Another, Bill Hughes, the chairman of the Crime Committee in the House Judiciary, was chaired by Bill Hughes of New Jersey, and the other was Senator Kerry. Now let us all agree on one thing. Let's get to the point where there is no challenge. One, that the CIA hired people to commit illegal acts, to wit, smuggling guns illegally to Nicaragua. That goes unchallenged, right?
No argument.
All right. And the second thing is that these same people were involved in narcotic trafficking.
Some of the same people who were kicked off the payroll and were discovered.
Listen, now we're getting closer to agreement. Some of the people that were legally taking guns over there were involved in narcotics. That's agreed to. Let's say something else. Colonel North knew that some of these people were involved in drug smuggling.
And may have made
Would you
money.
say that?
And may have made money.
Let me make another.
Once you start agreeing to all of these things, then comes the question where we were stonewalled. They said, prove that the CIA knew it. So
You're taking
Wait. I've got to make another point that keeps getting mistaken here. You see, the committees did not investigate whether the CIA condoned drug trafficking. They did not investigate that. So that's what we need to get clear.
And let me take a break. I'll let you, as soon as you come back, I'll put you right in. But the other point they're making is back 2.5 years ago, I did a show about the Persian Gulf War Syndrome. And everybody said, Montel, you're out to lunch. You're crazy. Why are you telling people in America that we have to be worried about some disease? These sailors are all stupid. They're all crazy. All the Army guys are crazy. It's all made up. Now, 2 weeks ago, Congress investigates them all of a sudden. We did some stuff wrong. And now we're going to start paying. So we'll find out about this. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll meet an attorney who says the CIA needs new guidelines. That's what this is all about. We'll be back right after this. Yes, ma'am, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just more or less had a comment more so than a question. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time. What is the surprise now? The black race has always said we don't have the money nor the means. And it's always been, I've heard this since I was a child. And now all of a sudden it's a big surprise.
Right.
It's always been, we've always felt that way.
It's not a surprise. You know, we don't grow cocaine in the ghettos of America. It's got to come from somewhere. And the only thing that I will ask is that my good friend Charlie Rangel here, if he will go back and help get legislation started that will create a Records Act. Once we create a Records Act, then we can all see what's there, classified or otherwise, and make up our own minds, black or white.
Okay, Michael, I got to let you go ahead.
I was hired by the government as a tactician. Right now, what we're succumbing to is what Central Intelligence wants. We're making it a black issue.
And it's not.
And it's not. My brother died. My son died. There's millions of Americans who suffered. The important thing that we've got to remember is that it is not a black issue, and the proof that they're waiting for it to go away is that both presidential candidates are not saying a word.
And I can tell you, Montel, that my audience is much like your audience. It's across the board. I mean, I read in this Accuracy in Media where they claim that this is a Get Whitey campaign. Well, let me tell you something. There are black, white, Hispanic dealers, black, white, Hispanic distributors, black, white, Hispanic users, and the CIA, I assume, is not all white. So, you know, this is an American tragedy. It's not a get white tragedy. It's to get who's responsible and hold them accountable.
Okay, hold on just a second, Michael. Please welcome our next guest for the show. He served as a special counsel to the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations in 1989. Please welcome Mr. Jack Blum to the show. Jack, near the end of the segment, I'm going to let you in the show when you come back. What do you think about all this? Real quick, and I'll get you some more from you when I come back from break.
We've been there and we've done that. We did this investigation. We did it 10 years ago. We had witnesses under oath. We can say for a fact that Contras dealt cocaine, that the secret war in Nicaragua created conditions that opened the door to a flood of cocaine in America. And we know that the CIA and Oliver North and people in the White House knew about that.
Can we also
we said
say,
it in a public report.
I'm getting DEA agents, I'm telling you. I got a call last week from an agent who said, Montel, I will give you the location of the airfields they flew into. One of them is in Texas at a U.S. Army Air Force, or U.S. Air Force base. So why can't we go after these guys? Because that means that it wasn't just Reagan and Ali, but it may have been Bush and
You've got to bring them in under
more
oath.
than just know about it. They actively destroyed cases. They actively put DEA agents' lives on the line to protect the drug flow. I was one of those.
Let me take a break, and I'm going to let everybody come in one at a time, and we'll try to get through the next one. We'll be back right after this.
We have been engaged in a holy war against communism for 50 years. This didn't start in Central America with this problem, and it didn't end there. We started with Kun Sa in Burma, helping the Kuomintang against the Communist Chinese. He became a major heroin dealer. In the Vietnam War, we worked with hill tribesmen who were in the heroin business. You may have seen the movie Air America. The problem here is it's gone on again and again and again. We've just recently worked with people in Afghanistan who were great heroes against the Russians and against communism, But we trained people who came back and planted a bomb at the World Trade Center and are dealing heroin. As we speak, Afghanistan and Pakistan are one of the world's great heroin centers. It ain't new.
Michael,
The
jump in.
problem is control.
1993, the Cold War is over. Central Intelligence is caught red-handed smuggling a ton of cocaine from Venezuela, that bastion of communism, to the United States, red-handed. The head of DEA on 60 Minutes said there's no other way to describe it. Drug smuggling, felony drug smuggling. I went to California and spoke to the DEA agent directly involved, who told me that Central Intelligence came to her in Venezuela with what she described as a wacky, suspicious idea to smuggle a ton of cocaine, and she told them, don't do it. They did it anyway and were caught by customs. Specific people.
And they got
no
off.
Cold War, no investigation.
Let me ask Jack, what happened when you did this report, which I've read, which was extensive? How did the press react when you put that out?
We were assaulted on all sides by the administration. Every time we had a day of hearings, every time we had a witness, the Reagan people came down on us like a ton of bricks. They said the witnesses were lying, they were drug dealers who were trying to get off, that we were in it for politics. And in a way, it's a wonderful thing to have this resurface in a context where we don't have the official establishment raining on it, so maybe now somebody will go back and read what we did.
But I think Mike is right. What will happen tomorrow is, since I'm the only show that's doing this, it'll be put off as being a black person feeding into the conspiracy. And I have one more point. The bottom line of this whole thing is Blandon, the gentleman that we are all talking about, who was just paid $166,000 by the CIA and DEA, it was a DEA, is in Nicaragua hanging out at a ranch. And we all, for 9 years, tried to track this guy down for being one of the biggest cocaine dealers. He's at a ranch in Nicaragua, free man, walking free, and Ricky Ross is sitting in jail, and Blandon was his supplier. How does that happen in America? Tell me. Let me take a break. We'll be back right after this. We're almost out of time. Joe, you wanted to ask Mike a question.
Mike, I know one or two congressmen. Let's do this. I'd love to take you down to Washington, let you get under oath, and sit at a table and swear to this, what you're saying today. Would you do this under oath?
I want to tell you something. Don't have any faith in Congress. Senator Frank
That's not my
Church,
question.
Senator
Would you
Frank
go
Church
down
is
and say
a waste of time. A friend of mine who was flying drugs in, his name is, he asked me, he says, I'm invited down to testify to the Senate. What do you advise? He says he actually flew the
You don't
drugs.
trust
There's a contract.
Congressman Rangel here?
No, I don't trust well, I don't believe the Congress of the United States has been able to control the Central Intelligence for 20 years. They've been working as apologists for them. In a deep cover probe, it was a New York Times bestseller where I detailed, backed up by
Mike. You know, all this, let me agree with Mike.
my
The one
testimony is
thing
in
that's
print.
coming out of this is that there should be outrage in these United States that any federal agency can plan to murder American citizens, whether they're black or white. The delay has been that they said that they targeted it for black communities. What we're saying is that let the CIA get on the line, let's open the records, let the president, let Dole and everyone see what's going on.
Let's get him down to Congress. You have
We don't need to answer all that. I can fix this for you right now. If you're at home, you're watching this television show, I'd like you to get on your phone. Get on your phone this minute, call your local congressman, and you tell your congressman that Montel asked you to call, and we want hearings within a week.
Montel,
and you can call us so I can track how many people called. We'll get a call to 100,000 phone calls.
I trust
very serious problem.
I trust the American people.
Exactly.
I trust Montel Williams. And God bless you and Gary Webb for doing this show, because you've done something the New York Times won't do. The Washington Post does a little job to try to make black people look like they're paranoid.
And also
the
said
reality
only
is,
reporters the likes
the
of
more
Montel would do it.
informed we are, the freer we are. And that's the most important thing.
I gotta take another break. I'm gonna give both of you a shot. We come back, we'll be back right after this. You know, we're almost out of time, so I would advise you to go out and read Triangle of Death by Mr. Michael Levine. Go and get it today if you want to know more information about what goes on deep inside the CIA. Let's stop hoodwinking the public. Let's just get the truth out there. Mr. Blum, you wanted to make a final comment.
Look, we've had all the investigations we need. We know what happened. The time has come to debate serious reform. There was a debate over intelligence reform. It wound up with an addition of people and an addition of money. The time has come to take a look at what we're doing. The Cold War is over. Let's find some new solutions, maybe even a whole new agency. We don't have to dig through this anymore. We know what happened.
The only reason why I would advise us to dig through it is to make sure we find out who is culpable, Senator Rangel.
The CIA should be proud to open up their records and let it all hang out. The President of the United States should be in a position to say, not on my watch do Americans break the law and sell poison to kill other Americans. And if nothing else, this show is doing that.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for being here and making America aware. Join us on the next Montel Williams show.